Hello everyone, today we are going to look at a D chord on ukulele. We're going to look at a basic way to play a D chord, a couple of alternative ways to finger that. We're then going to look at a couple of other ways to play a D chord as well. So even if you're familiar with a D chord already, there should be a few things in here that will help you learn to play D chord in another way. Let's move to a close-up and get to this D chord. So to play a D chord, what we actually need to do is fret the second fret, the top, the next one down and the next one down. That's the G string, the C string and the E string, and we leave our A string open. So we start with our index finger on the G string, we use our second finger on the C string and our third finger on the E string, fret 2. So hopefully you can see that. I'll just rotate a little bit there. And our bottom string is completely open. And it should sound something like that. So to do this well, it's really useful if you don't have your thumb popping up over the top. It's quite difficult with your thumb popping up over the top. So you're going to drop your thumb down and squeeze behind where you are actually fretting, and that will just allow you to put a bit more pressure. So that's a basic D chord on ukulele. I almost never play my D chord that way. I almost always fret it slightly differently. So instead of using my index finger on the top string, I actually use my second finger on the top string. I use my index finger on the C string and my third finger on the E string, which is a little bit more cramped and it feels a little bit more unnatural. And you can sort of see there as I'm trying to adjust my camera angle that it's quite cramped. Just move my hand around so you can maybe see that a little bit better. So effectively I'm sort of squeezing my fingers together sort of on top of each other. Hard to see, but there. And the reason I play it like that is if I need to switch to an A, which is a very common switch from a D, I can just slide my index finger down and lift my third finger off. And suddenly I've got an A. Or alternatively, if I wanted to change to a G, and again, this is a really common change, I can leave my index finger in place, drop my second finger to that bottom string and put my third finger on the C string third fret. And I've got a G, so I'm able to just leave my index finger on for two very common changes, which is why I often play my D chord with my index finger on the C string rather than the more traditional way of using your index finger on the G string. It can be quite a difficult chord to play. So that's a basic D chord that we've got there. And one really useful thing to know about major chords, D is a major chord, is that major chords only contain 3 notes. So when you're strumming 4 strings, you're actually playing 4 notes. In any major chord that you're playing, 2 of those notes are going to be the same. So in our D chord, we have 3 notes. We have a D, we have an F sharp or a G flat, and we also have an A. And actually that A is doubled up on this top string. If for any reason you're having quite a tough time playing this D chord, here's a little tip that might help you. Now, because there are only 3 notes in a major chord, that technically means we don't need to strum all the strings. So if we just strum the top 3 strings and stop without strumming the bottom string, that's a D chord. That's a perfectly acceptable D chord. Equally, if we strum only the bottom 3 strings, again, that is a perfectly acceptable D chord. So which means that we can either bypass our pointy finger if you're having trouble with that, or we can just play frets 2 of the C and E string and strum the bottom 3 strings. That's a much easier way to play a D chord, and also it's a completely fine D chord to play. So you've got that option. So now let's have a look at a couple of other ways to play a D chord. So I'm going to move back to a close-up and show you a couple of other ways to play a D chord, just to sort of mix it up, and we'll explain why you might need to do that as well. So let's have a look at an alternate way to play that D chord now. So for this, we are going to bar at fret 2 with our index finger, and we're going to drop our pinky finger on fret 5 of the A string or the bottom string, which is It's a much brighter sounding D chord And you might just find that certain songs, this version of the D chord fits a little bit better than the more standard open version of the D chord that we just learned. And if you actually look at the mechanics of this one, the top 3 strings are barred up fret 2, which is exactly the same as what we had before, but we're just changing this bottom note. So rather than leaving it open like we did before and doubling up the A notes, we're actually switching that to a D and we're doubling up the D note. So our D note is here and it's doubled up here. Just an octave apart, those 2 notes, but it gives it a different feel. So that's one. Another barred version of a D chord we can play is to bar at fret 5 and drop our 2nd finger on fret 6 of the C string and our 3rd finger on fret 7 of the G string. So that's quite a sweet sounding chord. If you're familiar with moving chord shapes around, that is actually our A chord, which is normally down here, but just slid right up and barred at fret 5. So 3 different D chords there. They're all D chords, they're all D major chords. You can use any of them at any point where you see a D in a song. Definitely worth experimenting with other versions, and I hope you've learned something quite useful there. Thanks for watching. I hope you've learned something new or useful with your D chord there, even if that is just a slightly different way to finger the D chord, or maybe you've picked up a second version of a D chord that you can throw in just to mix up your playing a little bit. Thanks for watching. If you found this video useful, please do give it a thumbs up, and if you like the channel, give me a subscribe. It's all very, very welcome, and see you soon.